purpose behind this presentation was to point out that Java is not that old language from the mid-90s, that somehow Java has been left behind. And if you want to be up to date and cool and use the it language, it has to be something else. Python is one example, which, by the way, is an excellent language. This is not meant to, whine about any other languages. They're all excellent. They all have their purposes. But I believe, as someone who has taught Java since 2000 and had taught C, C++, Pascal before that, I have found that Java has always been the best language for preparing students for the industry, even if upon graduation, Java is not what they use. So here's a couple points. I'm not going to read them all, but we always hear things about Java. For instance, my favorite is the steep learning curve. Oh my God, Java is so much more difficult than X, Y, or Z. Well, my experience has been that the only reason students think Java is difficult to learn is because their teachers had a terrible time learning it and have pretty much fought the language all the way through, right? So yeah, if your teacher goes and grumbles while they have to type public or put in a semicolon, that's gonna, get out in the class, and suddenly the whole class is going to be turned against the language. The general belief that Java is only good for the big things. And that if you want to do something quick and dirty, Python is a perfect example of a language people think of. But with things like single file source code, or under Linux, the Shebang and the JBang project have all greatly simplified what you need to get Java up and running and what you can do with it. And then the final point on this slide is just about the fact that because we associate Java with Oracle, there is the misconception that it is a closed environment. It's not. It is open. As a matter of fact, I sit on the JCP executive committee, and what I see is that all the development work is contributed to the Open JDK. And Oracle takes the Open JDK and brands it the same way Microsoft takes the Open JDK and brands theirs, and Amazon and every other flavor of Java out there. I love when people tell me that Java is an old language and Python is the new language. As you can see, Python's actually older than Java. And Java was always designed as a full stack, that there was no aspect of what a modern programmer needs to do that is not handled by the Java language. We have to get teachers to know this. More Java programmers than any other type of programmer in the world. I have found that in my career as a teacher, there was always somebody I could find who could answer those obscure questions, the questions that sometimes students would pose to me, and I would scratch my head going, gee, I would have never thought of that. I'm a good boy. I follow all the instructions and all the directions. I never considered doing something outside those edge cases. There's always going to be somebody there. And a point I just made a moment ago, I sincerely believe that by starting your career in software development with Java, you're in a much better position to transfer those skills to any other language out there. There was always something I guess I'm responsible for it. Which would you rather have? A Python programmer who one day walks into the offices and is told, you have to code in Java this week? Or the Java programmer who walks into the office and they're told, this week you better do Python? And I'm going to give a plug. I'm actually writing a book right now called Transitioning to Java for all those non-Java programmers who one day discover, oops, I need to know Java for now. And of course, Java is the basis of Android development. So let's look at a few key features of Java, excuse me, that I believe make it an ideal language at, I'll be honest with you, all levels, right? I've seen Java successfully taught in high school environments, obviously college, university. The first, of course, is JShell, this REPL type tool. It simplifies instruction. We don't need a lot of overhead. We enter something and it executes, that immediate response that some people, point to other languages as having that capability. We can use it any way we want. We can write code offline and drop it into JShell. Depending on the environment you're teaching with, it is an ideal way to get familiar with the language, as it says, one line at a time. This is the feature that I tend to be most fond of in a teaching environment, because it allows me in a classroom to show code. My students just need the JDK installed and any text editor, even lowly old Notepad in Windows or perish the thought VI in Linux. Once you've written your code, as long as it's in a single file and does not refer to a package, you just say Java, no Java-C, just Java. It compiles and executes. So in a more formal setting where students are all sitting at their own machines and without having to concern them with, oh my God, IntelliJ's got 5,000 buttons, which one do I press? We can work with a single file source code. This is one of my new favorites, var. This is something we see all the time. My class am equals new my class. But why do we have to say my class on both sides of the assignment operator? Well, that's where var comes in. And because var requires assignment immediately, you cannot just say var m and say like a final, wait till later on before you make the assignment. You must make the assignment immediately. And if you're using it with objects, as the last point says, you're less likely to get a null pointer exception for forgetting to instantiate an object. Ah, yes, old school concatenation. I think we've all become adept at trying to figure out how to take long strings and piece them together in some way so that we can create a single string, right? I've created here a little piece of HTML. Well, we now have text blocks using 3 double quotation marks. This really simplifies, especially if you're doing web type programming and you want to send HTML down, that concatenation and pluses or lines that are 200 characters long falling off the screen just don't work. Text blocks make this kind of coding much easier for everyone. Ah, the switch. I did some research for another presentation I did and discovered that that switch on the left, what I call the C-style switch, was first introduced in the 50s. I'm not quite sure which language, if it was Fortran who used something like it, I'm not sure. But that silly switch has stayed with us since then. The break. If I see one more book that does things like case, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are weekdays, and 1 and 7 are weekends, and all this nonsense of allowing it to fall through. No, it doesn't make any sense. And then on the right, we're looking at the switch expression. There's also a switch statement, but I just have the expression here. As the question says, I'd much rather teach somebody how to do the switch on the right than the switch on the left. And coming, it's still just a feature preview in 19, is pattern matching in the switch, which is somewhat of a misnomer because although it allows you to do a switch on an object type, so you can say things like case integer, case string, case on a class, then you can add additional conditions. You can have and, ors. You can build up complex decisions in a single case. Something, if there's any old timers here, is reminiscent of Visual Basic 6. Then there's the record. I'm sure many of you have experienced the Lombok project, an excellent library, but every day I read another article saying we need more immutability, right? We could argue that another time, but the record has just simplified this. What we see here is a record that has 5 instance variables. We do not need to declare them or anything, just by in the parentheses for the record name, we just list their type. We can even stop here. We don't need anything else. We get a free constructor. Actually, we have to have a default constructor, but a default constructor that has 5 parameters. We must initialize all of them. Then we also have the compact constructor. And it's compact because we don't have to list the parameters. The only possibility for a constructor in a record is a constructor that takes all of the variables. So here I can just test any of them. In this case, age. Less than 18, I can throw my exception. I access elements through the object reference dot and the name of the variable. So there's no more set and get. And if need be, I can even add more methods to the record. So let's do some comparison. And I've chosen Python. And as I said, Python's an amazing language. In other slides, I probably say some nasty things, but I'm not going to today. But I want to begin with what I consider the worst software design pattern, the stream of consciousness. And let me tell you, I'm going to show you stream of consciousness in Java as well. But this is a perfect example of why people point at Python and say, look how easy this is, right? I can input, I can include my prompt, and I can perform my calculation. Here I'm calculating how much it will cost to borrow money. But I can do the same thing in Java with only a handful more lines. So here's the same code. And the only reason it's significantly larger, or noticeably larger, is the fact that we need 2 lines to present the prompt and pick up the input. But of course, any programmer worth their salt would probably create a new method that would combine the 2. So here we have exactly the same thing. Yes, it's all in main. This isn't object-oriented. But when you've got to do that, as I call it, quick and dirty, Java is just as valid. And then a quick comparison. I'm not going to keep you much longer on this, but a quick comparison between object-oriented Python and, of course, what we've all grown to love, object-oriented Java. So this is the same program, now organized, what I would call there's some separation of concern here. We have a method for input, a method for processing, we have output, and then we have effectively the equivalent of our main, where we actually call upon the methods. This would be an example of an object-oriented solution. Keep in mind that because Python is what I call a dynamically typed, it's not statically typed in the same manner as Java, you've got to read the code a little more carefully to recognize what might be returned from a method in Python. And of course, yes, it's longer because of those braces, but here is exactly the same code in Java. And here I contend that this code will make more sense to someone learning to program than the Python code. Staying with Python for the moment, Python is strongly associated with machine learning, artificial intelligence. A lot of amazing libraries have been written in C, and because of the nature of Python, Python interfaces with C libraries very well. Java can. It is on the verge of gaining a level of simplicity akin to Python, right? Part of the new projects coming on board will probably see it finalized around Java 20. But until then, a number of organizations that are involved in the creation of machine learning, artificial intelligence, are beginning to produce their libraries in Java. We now have a standard API for visual recognition using AI. If we need to build production systems that employ AI, I contend Java is the best language for that. So what I would finish giving this presentation, and this is a presentation that's out there, you may want to give it to teachers, to schools. We've got to get the word out. There's so much misinformation about Java. So the points I make, get students to join your JUG. And again, not just university, get into the high schools, right? You know, these are the people you want to convince. You want to encourage faculty. I've seen this here in Montreal at our JUG, and I was a teacher at a college here, Dawson College, for 31 years. I was chairperson of the department for 25. And I discovered that teachers can be as lazy as anybody else. And sometimes they need to be prodded to get more involved with the community for whatever language they specialize in. Reach out to computer science student associations. Every university with a computer science program likely has one. See if you can have a JUG meeting on campus. Here, working with a students association, this could help. Schools love to learn that their students are meeting working people like us. Well, maybe not me. Get a meeting on campus. Get information out to the teachers on those campuses. Let them know the resources available. Make yourself a resource. Hold meetings just for teachers, right? Let them get a sense of what the real world is. You know, I worked as a freelance developer for 10 years. This was in the 80s, so long before Java. Then I had the opportunity to get into teaching. And one thing I've always been aware of is I lost touch with the real world. And that's when I became more involved with the Java community, started attending Java 1, even organized a conference called DOSCon. That's now, I don't know where that's going, but now I run the Java Champions Conference. I want to get the word out, get involved in education. I can't talk too much about American high schools, but I know up here, my involvement with local high schools here in Montreal, where I am, the opportunity, and they all now have computer courses, to have somebody from industry come in and talk to the students is something they really want. Run hackathons, and keep in mind that those students will one day likely be your fellow employees sitting at the next desk. So there we go. There's my little presentation, the full presentation that you can download from the Java in Education website on the JCP. Has a little more information on it. I am always available. You can find me on Twitter at OmniProf. Might sound strange. Why am I OmniProf? Well, my company before I became a teacher was Omnibus. So I name everything OmniProf and drive people crazy. So follow me on Twitter. I always love answering questions and, working at making Java, or yes, making Java a primary language in education. certainly modern education, in no program do you learn just one language. At Dawson College, Java was our primary, but our secondary languages were C#. We did PHP, though we dropped PHP just before and I retired recently, and we replaced PHP with Python because we recognized that this was a skill set our graduates would need. I'll make one more plug. I'm trying to see if either Heather or Aaron can get in, but I guess not. So I may be the whole show. And that is, you want the setting in education to reflect the workplace, right? That was, what I am most proud of my time at Dawson College. We trained students in a 3-year program to be ready to work, not to necessarily do other research, but to be productive on the first day they arrive at whatever company hires them. And Montreal is a fairly hot market for software development. We have seen in the last couple of years 100% employment for our students. If anything, companies are begging the colleges in Montreal, the universities, to turn out more graduates. So you want to, get the word out that there is no one language, but certainly the language I believe that every student should have at the center of their knowledge is Java. And the schools need working developers to contribute to their programs so they know what's really happening out there. I guess I'll ask if there's any questions. I see Courtney has run off to the airport. So is there any questions? I don't know. Let's see now. She may have turned off the chat. So let me check the status of that. No, allow participants to chat. So that's back online. So if anybody has any questions, I think you may even be able to unmute themselves. I'm going to do that. I'm going to take a chance here. Hopefully it doesn't get insane. Okay. So if anybody wants to talk rather than chat, I think you can unmute yourself and I can hear you. Yes, Sridhar?
Yes, hello. This is the first time I know this is for educators, and I'm not in the education field. I'm just in the industry here in Silicon Valley. But this is very useful, so thank you. But I have questions, and I'm always thinking, is there something else I need to be learning? What is the future of Java? And some great information here. I just wondered. You mentioned computer science clubs and associations. After you said that, I did a quick Google search to see if there's anything for this kind of educational purpose. And I see things open for current students, but for I guess mature professionals, if that's the right word, trying to just stay in touch with the grassroots learning, which I always feel is important. Is there anything similar open to us? That the most I have really is meetup.com, and there's always a bit of corporate agenda for that, and it's just not as good broad coverage of computer science and something as pure as this talk.
So again, different situations, different cultures, the way things work. As you said, go to, look up on, the computer science program at a local universities. There's a good chance there's going to be a computer science students association. Now, they only allow students to join. But what I'm saying is you want to offer to them yourself as a speaker, as someone who can stand in front of them and say, you know what? I can tell you what your life is going to be like. Right? That what is a day on the job? It is never going to be like a day at school or completing an assignment. It is a different world. And, unfortunately, we see this here in Quebec. You have university trained students, you have college trained students. And the problem that university trained students have is they just don't know what the workplace is going to be like. The college programs, and there's a number of colleges in Quebec that deliver computer programming as what we call a technology, we focus on, hey, you came to our program to get a job at the end, not to go on and do, graduate work or so on. And so our students are in a better position there. And I think this is what universities are missing. If you've spent your whole career doing research, you've created, the most amazing sort routine, you've proved that merge sorts really don't work, or whatever your research has been, great. But your students, except for a handful of them, are not going to be researchers. They're going to be going out and working for whether it's Microsoft or some new startup. And all of you are in startup world. And I should say Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver are the big startup centers here in Canada. So this is your contribution. Let the students at universities know. Let the students in high school know. This idea that you're all going to be sitting around like at Google playing musical instruments and using the climbing wall, both of which they have at Google offices here in Montreal. That's just kind of silliness. They need to know what it is that's going to be expected of them.
Thank you for the detailed answer. Great information. And yeah, I guess there's no easy way in, but yeah, trying to give something in return is one route.
Yeah, it's up to us to reach out to them. If we're going to wait for them, it ain't going to happen. Any other questions that I can answer? How about questions I can't answer?
Yes, hi. I've been working on a Java library. I've posted it to Maven. It's for dealing with audio. And Java audio can be kind of tricky to work with. I think this simplifies a lot of aspects. I think that students often would like to make interesting sound tools potentially. So I'm working on a talk that I hope to present or I post up on YouTube that will explain that library and some of the have demos of some of the things you can do with it. And I was just checking if, it'll mention it to you in case. I'm not sure I feel up to like developing a course. I could help with projects that maybe are something that some kids would like to do with sound in Java that I could potentially help with, but I don't see myself having the wherewithal to push through a whole course or anything.
Well, so it's not a matter of pushing through a course. So you have a library. It has to do with sound. That's a big thing. Music, sound. It's a matter of, again, reaching out. Whether the jug here. I would begin by seeing if you could do a presentation on your library here.
I'm working on that.
It's not about a whole course, right? The idea is if it's a good library, then people using it should be able to understand how it works. If it's well documented, you want to inspire them to download your library and apply it. And it's really what I'd say is try and get a speaking tour. The universities, the high schools, you may even find high school students can be a lot more imaginative. They haven't been hammered down as much as university students. And so they can see some exciting possibilities there. So it's not about, developing a, 10-week, 3-hour-a-week course on your library. No, that's not going to work. And that's not what you were trained to do. I did that for 31 years. But people want to hear from you. You have experience in the industry. You saw a need. You had an interest. Let what excites you about what you did infect the students that you can meet.
Very good. Interesting to hear about expanding ideas to the tour beyond just the jugs, but to high schools and things like that. Maybe once I get the basic talk working up and running, I might pick your brains again down the road as to finding places to how to locate.
Well, it's my pleasure. In terms of finding things, it's a matter of getting a list of high schools, finding out which high schools do have a computer science course. I think more and more of them, it's suddenly become a core up there with language and math and computer skills, certainly. Though I worry that for many schools, computer skills are how to use Microsoft Word.
Yes.
Which my experience is there isn't a student alive today who can't figure out Microsoft Word. So I think it's a waste of time trying to teach them how to use it. Teach them how to use your sound library. And that's the kind of message you want to get out.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Oh, I've been hanging out at a forum for a long time it used to be called javagaming.org, and they've changed it to jvmgaming.org. One of the nice things about it, back when I first joined, Marcus Persson was one of the people who hung out there and was in the process of making Minecraft, and used to post there. A lot of the interest, unfortunately, has gone out of making games in Java, unfortunately. It's gone over to, things like, I don't have it at the top of my head because I didn't prepare to speak this, but there are other places where people go now to make games that are more, where you're just, it's a whole framework that's set up. Whereas with Java, you're pretty much making things from scratch unless you're using, there's a couple libraries like I think it's called JMonkeyBrains or J.
I think you're going to find that there are a fair number. I know I read about development, especially around Java FX. I do a presentation on what should be retired from the Java language. So we all know about things that are deprecated, meaning stop using it because it's going to disappear. I use retired to describe things that aren't going to disappear, but really stop using it. And a perfect example of that is swing, right? I cannot think of, if there was any language that pushed people towards C# or any branch of Java, it was Swing. The Windows Foundation classes in C# were so much better. But Java FX is amazing. And, we can all grumble about, Oracle's decision to push it out. And it's now, an open source project. Oracle continues to contribute to it. But that's the language to look at. In my courses, I did project courses. So third year, they do a desktop project, then they do a web project. So with the desktop, we started off with Swing, right? I was teaching that course since about 2005, and they worked, right? The project was typically an email client, a kind of subset of Outlook, right? And it was great. And then when I saw Java FX and when I felt it was ready for the classroom, overnight, we went from a whole bunch of bland applications to some stunning work. Just the fact that you can apply CSS to Java FX. You've now simplified Divine. That's a big deal. And if we pop over to the web world, granted, nobody likes to talk about actually generating web pages from Java, but for the longest time, it was Java server pages, another amazing mistake. Whereas Java server faces, again, I watched as my students went from developing bland e-commerce websites to suddenly dynamic sites with, that rivaled anything out there because of the amazing libraries, the ability to deliver JavaScript and CSS inside of your Java server faces pages. It really changed things. And that message isn't getting out there, right? People, and I think for many professors who, they learned maybe Java in their undergraduate in the late 90s, early 2000s, and quite frankly, they haven't bothered to look at it since. And one day they woke up and went, gee, every other language looks cooler than Java. But that's because they haven't seen what Java is today. So, there's the things. And that's part of what we as Jugs need to do. We need to get that word out.
Yeah, JavaFX is so I did the switch over a few years back, and I resist using Swing whenever possible. The folks at the forum, most of them thought JavaFX was pretty good, but there were some low-level things dealing with the images at a byte level that's very quick that JavaFX did not allow access to. And there was a lot of lobbying to try to get that built into JavaFX, but it never happened. So there was a degree of speed and performance that discouraged some the developers.
Well, I can tell you,
Java in general is, as very close to incomparable as as fast as C and equivalents, but there were some of the tools for the graphics didn't allow a certain low-level access that would have greatly sped them up if they had just allowed a person to put bytes in instead of having to go through certain other routines.
True. So one of the strange things that I've discovered in terms of social media and programming is the place of Twitter. Now, forgetting all the politics, everything else, blah, blah, blah. So I've been on Twitter for many years, and I only follow people in the industry. And if somebody I follow decides to go off on a tangent that makes me feel uncomfortable, I will drop them. But for the most part, Twitter is the home of Java developers. I can tell you the entire Java FX team follows information on Twitter. So if you want to find out what's happening at low level, just tag it as Java FX, and there's a good chance you'll hear from the developers.
I'll give that a try. Thank you.
Yeah, Brian Getz, one of the chief developers of Java, does keep an eye on it. I know he thinks I'm a bit of an idiot because of some of the things I say, but I enjoy, what's it called? Pulling his chain, yanking his chain. We always laugh about it whenever we meet. So, that's where I don't use Stack Overflow. I consider that a waste of time. If I have a question, and I've mentioned I'm working on a book now, and, there's things like, why is this here? So I will state, I believe Java works this way because, and let me tell you, talk about an invitation to people to tell me I'm either wrong or I'm right, and I can figure out what's going on very quickly. So Twitter is the place to be. I don't know how it is in relation to other languages, what their social media is. Everybody going to a Slack channel somewhere? I can't tell you. But, just tag things on Twitter with any particular library you want, and there's an excellent chance that developers will hear about it.
Thanks. That's a good idea.
Cool. Anything else I can answer or add to the confusion? Yes.
I was going to mention, someone was asking about places for learning Java. I'm just going to mention that Reddit has a Learn Java channel. I think that was Sridhar maybe was asking. And there would probably be people there that could point to different directions.
If for some reason you have access to videos on Springer Link, I just finished a video for Apress that's up on Springer Link.
Oh, okay.
For beginners to Java, right? Where, I just focus on just a few pieces of it to get somebody up and running and seeing how Java works, all from the command line. not being overwhelmed with an IDE with a million buttons. And there's a lot of great stuff out there. Yes, there's a lot of stuff behind paywalls, but there's also a lot of stuff free. And, if you have friends who are saying to you, gee, I need to learn Java, if you're going to recommend something that's free, maybe take a few minutes and go over it yourself. Just to make sure. Free doesn't always mean good. So take a look at it. And then if it works, let people know about it, right? Not everybody can afford Pluralsight, is it Pluralsight licenses or some of the other companies out there. There's a lot of good things. And always see, if you're any language you're learning, find a mentor. Find somebody, well, I wouldn't call them in the middle of the night, but somebody you can message and say, I just don't understand this. And that can go a long way to improving your position in the industry and your own job, whether it's a mentor in the company or outside. Find people you can talk to. So it looks like Heather and Aaron have somehow or other gotten lost. This hacking situation was just weird. As some of you mentioned, we've never seen it quite this bad. It seems to have quieted down now. But I don't really see, we've just gone over about an hour and 10 minutes. I don't think we need to stick around and stare at each other any longer. So if any of you would like to, let's see, it's still early for you. Out here, it's 11:45 at night. And hopefully I'll have an opportunity to talk to your Jug and maybe even come out there. I've kind of sad. I kind of enjoyed San Francisco. It was my second city. I was there 5 years in a row for Java 1, and then the pandemic, and that was the end of that. And now I'm off to Vegas, which I've never been to, so I'm looking forward to that. I've already put aside my entire betting package of $20. I haven't decided if it's going to be $20 Canadian or $20 US. And I'm looking for slot machines, and that's it. So are any of the people here on the call going to Vegas in October?
That's where the annual conference is, right?
Yeah, the Java 1 that's come back. Yeah, I think it's going to be I think a thin year. People are still a little uncomfortable about traveling and stuff like that. But I think meeting face to face, right, can be important. Get to know the people who are helping you out. And sadly, we lose a little bit of that in Zoom. And but Zoom is certainly better than if we had to do this by sending each other letters in the mail. Yuck.
Agreed. Well, I'm not seeing any notices or messages at the meetup. I mean, at the site for signing up for this. I was thinking maybe the folks at. I'm sorry, I'm being real inarticulate. The Happening Now meetup.
I have to admit, I'm not familiar with the events that are happening,
it's
on your side of the continent.
It says Help Spread Java to Students and Educators, hosted by Peter H.
So that was today's meeting.
Yeah, I was just checking there to see if there were any messages or comments about from the people that left early because of the hacking, but I'm not seeing anything.
I'm sure people will reach out to the Jug leaders to see if there's other tools available to simplify or to eliminate this. It certainly means I'm going to be keeping an eye out on this. Again, it's something I've never seen in any other meetings, but I think the problem is the URL for the meeting was widely publicized, and what can I say? People are people.
Yep.
So I think the best thing is to call it an evening. Oh, yes. You had a question?
Well, I guess I have no end of questions, and I was about to say, well, if we were scheduled to go longer, but we don't have our other speaker, then I do have more questions. But
go ahead.
Yeah, okay, and it's all around my fear of trying to bet on the future. I'm about to turn 40 this year, graduated in 2005, and Java has been pretty much my entire career, and I just am constantly asking myself, will this be enough for my career in the sense of just being employable? I'm just trying to anticipate the future. I'm sure people more knowledgeable than me know that's impossible, but what are some warning signs that a language is not, that is in its twilight years, or why do languages die and become the languages of yesteryear? Do you have any kind of guidance or knowledge you can share?
The only insight I have, and this is based on at our program in my college here in Montreal, one part of our program is we find internship positions for our students. So most schools, the students are expected to go out and find some company that wants free labor or cheap labor, get it approved by the faculty, and then they go off. Our program, the risk of our students ending up at the local convenience store writing their website was just too big a concern. So we find the positions, which meant we had to have a good sense of what type of jobs were in the Montreal area. And that knowledge, very much had an impact on what we presented. So there's a strong Java community here. So we've always felt comfortable. We went through evaluations where we had to prove to the administration of the college that Java was the best language. But our secondary languages have changed. I mentioned we used to do PHP. We dropped that in favor of Python when we saw the demand for PHP developers in our part of the world had dropped. We saw that, early on. I was in a program where it was a COBOL program, and I was hired to teach C. And that market grew, and then it faded away as more and more work went to business. I remember teaching Perl. Heck, I used to teach Perl as a CGI language, right? We would build websites based on Perl. And what was the joke the other day? Perl's the only language that looks the same after it's been encrypted as it did before. I thought that was a great line for Perl, right? So it's a matter of understanding what people are asking for. I think the best way to learn what languages are important, what aren't, is go to job listings, right? Ignore the things that say we want a junior developer with 9 years of experience. No, those are the ads you don't want to see. But what are people looking for? And certainly we see a lot of web, JavaScript is big. Python is big in the data analytics field. But I have to be honest with you, my crystal ball says Python's day in the sun is going to leave us, right? It's just, in my opinion, not robust enough for 24/7 production systems, right? And I'm sure Python people will tell me I'm crazy. I probably am. But to me, that's what's been important about Java, the tooling behind it, right? The fact that, unit testing, logging. I've become fond of I hate the name, the Java Micro Benchmark Harness, which is really nothing more than a kind of internal profiling system that you can look at any method in your code and profile it in such a way that you're warming up the JVM, you're running it many, many times to get a proper average. There's all this tooling going on. The fact that there's, as I mentioned in the presentation, the VisiRec API. And, You take a look at, and if you're not a member of the JCP, it's worth joining. You just ask to join and you're a member of the JCP. And if you do join, by the way, you can vote for me when I come up for election in November. But the advantage of being part of the JCP is you get access to the mailing list, the documents. I'm up to date. I know what's coming up in Java 20, what they're thinking of in 21. The JCP is a great way to follow how Java is advancing. It's where the best place, I think, to recognize that Java is not stagnant. It is evolving with the market, with what people want to do with programs. It is becoming simpler, right? A lot of the boilerplate is slowly fading away. Some of it will never go, and it cannot go because we need connections to tooling. And that's what concerns me about, my first example of Python, that kind of stream of consciousness, right? That type of code is going to be near impossible to test or benchmark or, make part of something else. That's where Java's strength is. So watch the job market. Get involved with the JCP. Is it going in a direction you yourself think is the future? Or you're going to go there and go, wait a minute, they're in a tangent now. I'm worried about my career. I can't tell you which you'll feel. I think you'll feel excited about what's happening, but find out for yourself. Here's where opinions on Twitter are never fun.
Just a quick confirmation. When you say JCP, that's a Java Community, what is that?
Process.
Java Community Process.
Okay,
right. I see that here on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
I haven't.
Just so you understand how Java is managed, it's a bizarre system. So the Java language is technically owned, or the copyright is owned by the Oracle Corporation, who bought it, or who received it when they bought Sun. And that Oracle continues to invest a lot of money into the development, right? The majority of developers are all Oracle employees. But Java is also open sourced. And for a while, there were two versions. There was the open source, there was the Oracle. Oracle wanted money. It got really fuzzy and messy. But behind the scenes, Oracle made all their contributions to the open source. And so while the JCP is interested in Java, in essence, what the JCP is overseeing is OpenJDK, because that's where all the JSRs, the JEPs, that's where they're all discussed. You can see what projects there are, join them, and become part of how it's going. Oracle, really supports the language. Heck, their experiment with trying to make money from their JDK, you may not be aware, but they gave up on that. They're back to, and it only starts at Java 17. It's kind of weird. Older versions you'd still have to pay for, but going forward with Java 17, you can now use Oracle branded Java. But I'll be honest with you, there's no reason to, right? Whether it's Azul or Microsoft or Amazon, remember, they all must work the same.
Yeah, I think a lot of good information there. When I think of languages that are fading, I guess one of the things I see happening is when a language gets overly associated with a single platform or application. And I think that happened with PHP, where it's WordPress and PHP. It's like, as long as there's WordPress, there's PHP. But but that's like that's the main thing for PHP now.
I can't answer that. I don't know much of whatever else uses, but I run a WordPress site over on my my host, and that's where my blog is, like everyone else's. It just works, and that's that.
Yeah, but it seems like, as long as Java's up there with the, with the hanging around with the top 3 or 4 at TIOBE and those other metrics, I think I'm not going to worry too much about it. And the job listings are insane. If you go to Dice or something and you put in Java, there's, thousands of things turn up.
Oh yeah.
It's
for,
just,
for fun
yeah, it's not something you hear, oh, you should use what Kotlin instead of Java, you should do, this or that and replacing it. But Java's been, the development that it's been going through has been pretty spectacular in terms of staying current. And I think that's a really interesting observation you had about how it could potentially encroach on Python. It has some advantages over Python, but it could encroach as it gets, simpler and easier to use with AI and things like that for the analytics.
I know, for instance, here in Montreal, the major finance companies, the major banks, Java's running their servers, their front ends, Spring, React, a whole range of JavaScript frameworks there. But the back end, which has to be rock solid, is Java based. And, that to me is telling. When companies with big bucks, my understanding that many of the trading companies on the stock market use Java. There's even very specialized versions of Java just for that market, where you have to do transactions in, millionths of a second. There are versions of Java just for that market. So it is a dynamic language, and at this moment in time, if that's what you want to do, there's a job waiting for you.